Hi, happy day to you, whatever day it is that you're watching this. Um, so you have watched the welcome video. If you have not, go do that. You've watched the syllabus videos, so we got some logistics taken care of. If you have not, go do that. And now it's kind of like the second half of the first day of class. And basically, I just want to have a quick discussion about speeches and what they are and why we do them. So, a lot of these I'm going to have as if we're in class with each other, and I'm assuming you're going to be participating along and assuming what people might say. It will go faster since we're not actually in class. But yeah, so usually, and I've referenced this in the other videos, usually people are not thrilled to be giving speeches. Now, every once in a while, there's a couple people, and hopefully we have a couple in this class, right, who are all about it, right? They're like, oh, I love giving speeches. I love talking to people. Or I used to hate it, and now I don't. Now I love it, right? Um, for the most part, um, people are generally speech adverse. So I want to talk about why. And how do we know something is a speech? So, usually here we've done some kind of talking in class, right? Whether it's going around saying our names and sharing some things about us. Um, but so that's what I often use. But let's imagine that one day COVID is over and you get to go to a party. And you're at the party and someone, you know the person hosting the party, but you don't know a lot of the people there. And there's like a group of people in the kitchen, and they all start talking about something you love. Okay? So pretend it's something you love, and the host knows you love this thing. So they go, oh, so and so, that's you, right? So they say, they know all about this. Um, what is your opinion on this? And they look at you, okay? And then you, who love this thing, so whatever it is you love, right? Music, sports, theater, whatever, right? You talk about it. So you talk for a few minutes and you say, oh, yeah, I started doing this and blah, and I used to blah, 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 right? And so you talk for a few minutes to the general people in the kitchen. Is that a speech? Does that count as a speech? And I wish we were in person, right? Because I would take a poll and I would say, like, how many people think that counts as a speech? I went to the doctor today. And, she looked at me and she said, how have you been? And I told her. I talked back to her. Is that a speech? When I go to the restaurant and the person comes to take my order and they say, what would you like today? Right? And I answer back, is that a speech? So usually when I ask these questions, people are like, no, it's not a speech. And then I'll ask why. And they don't have a good answer. Usually the answers fall in some sort of like, speeches feel a certain way. They need to feel formal. They need to feel serious. Or sometimes people will say, well, that's just me talking about what I like. So that's not a speech. And I'll say, why not? And really what it often comes down to is that people have this idea that speeches are formal, boring things they don't like. And then when they're talking to people, but they're like it's not one person standing in front, it's not like a traditional setting, and it's not like a boring thing, then they don't count it. Or then they do count it, right? No, I lied. Then they don't count it. So speeches, big, scary, boring, formal events. If you're not doing that, then it's not a speech. I once taught an advanced public speaking class. I had this amazing student in my class. She was awesome, except she sat the whole class like this every day. Came in, and I'd say, what's up? She'd be like, don't like public speaking. Don't like public speaking. Don't like it. Every day of class, it was like, not about it. Don't like it. Not here for it. Well, then I found out, guess what she was doing as a career? Guess what she wanted to do as a career? She wanted to be a teacher. I burst out laughing. I said, Shelby, you do realize teaching is public speaking. That's all you do is you speak in front of people. She goes, that's different. Doesn't count. That's different. And I was like, what? And her guidelines, right, were like, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy talking to young people or students. I don't enjoy speeches. So check yourself. See if you do that. See if there are cases in your life where you enjoy talking. So notice the things that I'm coming back to here. Notice the things that are always present. And I'm using Aristotle's definition. And we're going to read Aristotle in a few weeks, well, in a couple of weeks, because this is a smoosh class, right? But so like we're talking, this is like public speaking all the way back 2,000 years ago, right? And the reason we still use Aristotle is because he's got staying power. He's still around. We still use a lot of his stuff. We've modified a lot of his stuff. And you'll see there's critiques to this, but he argues you only need 3 things to have a speech. So what do you think those are? 3 things to have a speech. Clearly, you need a speaker, right? You need somebody talking. That's like, that one is so obvious, people usually say it last because they just don't realize how obvious. Like, you need a speaker, right? And then you need somebody to listen. You need an audience, right? What am I doing here? 2 fingers, yeah. You need an audience. So you need a speaker, you need an audience, you need a topic. That's it. That's what Aristotle argues is the only things you need to have a speech. So now I want you to start going through your life and think how many times those 3 things are present, but you maybe don't count it as a speech, right? When you're hanging out with your friends at a lunch table and somebody says something and you talk for a little bit, do you count that? Or if one of your family members at a family reunion starts saying something stupid that you disagree with and you put them in their place, like, do you count that as a speech, right? One of the benefits of thinking of widening our concept of speech giving, it's beneficial for multiple reasons. So the first reason is you start to recognize that you have more of these skills than you think you do. So there are a handful of people I've had a handful of students throughout the years who say, nope, all of that gives me anxiety. I can't talk to people. I had one student who just basically she almost cried every time she came to class because she just she didn't like working in groups. She didn't like talking to anybody she didn't know very well. And it was hard to then know people very well because she didn't like talking to people. So I've had a couple examples of extreme cases where no, even giving an order at a restaurant gives me anxiety. For the most part, the people who are yeah, I'm not good at speeches, I don't like giving speeches, are just fine doing a lot of these things that we don't count as speeches, if that makes sense. So go through your life and think about how often, especially before COVID, you had a situation where you were a speaker, you were talking to somebody or an audience, and you were talking about something, a topic, right? Now, context is important. Of course, context is important. And I'm not trying to say that talking to the Starbucks barista is the same thing as speaking in front of 100 people. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that the only things that change are context. It's not like you do something totally different, right? You adjust based on context. One simple thing is you're not going to use the same volume to talk to the Starbucks barista as you are to 100 people in a room, right? Well, I might because I'm very loud. But so thinking about how context might change, but a lot of times what people's mental blocks change. It's oh yeah, I'm comfortable talking to one stranger, I'm not comfortable talking to 100. It's why? If you talk to a stranger 100 times, why not put the 100 in a room together? Why is that a problem? And part of the reason that it's a problem is because people have been told it's a problem, right? We have this idea that you aren't supposed to like public speaking and you aren't supposed to be good at it. Now, why do you think that exists? Who benefits from that? Who benefits from the fact that none of you care for public speaking? or very few of you. I'm making assumptions. I haven't met you. Maybe you all love it. Please let me know on the discussion board. But I highly doubt it based on my teaching experience. I would guess about 80% of you don't care for it. There's one or two of you that are super anxious and hate it so much and can't believe you have to take this course. And then there's probably one or two of you that are like either medium or kind of into it and kind of excited and don't really want to tell anybody. That's my guess. So wherever you fall on that spectrum, right? Like, let's think about what would it benefit or who benefits by giving public speaking a bad name. So this is what I usually do in class. What I usually do in class is I say, okay, I've debunked it for you. I've showed you that public speaking is just talking. It's just talking in front of an audience. We do that all the time. No big deal. Who wants to come up here? And as you can assume, I do not get rushed. No, like very rarely do people like stand up and nobody's ever rushed the stage, right? Like, let's all take turns. And I give anybody a chance. Anybody who wants to, they can come up here and talk. And they'll say, well, what will I talk about? I said, I don't care. Pick your topic. So usually I can get one person to do it, at least. And I will go take their seat. I'll sit in the audience. Now, sometimes people try to do a trick of like, okay, we're all on break, or okay, class goes home. But that's not the point, right? So then they'll talk about something they love. I once had a student talk about fantasy football. And he just went on and on about his fantasy football leagues, and I don't give a crap about fantasy football. You're never going to hear me talk about that, right? But I listened because it was his time. So he gets done, he talks for a minute or two, and then I ask again, does anybody else want to do it? And usually people say no. And I'll say, but like I showed you, it's safe. We're all in a safe space. Like nobody's going to yell at you. It's not scary. It's not formal. Who's ready? Now, sometimes I can get at least another person to do it, but I've never had multiple people. I've never had a line. I've never had to take a half hour out of class for people to do it, right? Who benefits in that circumstance from them being scared or just not wanting to public speak? Me. I benefit. I benefit big time. Because when I turn my class over to the person who wants to talk about fantasy football, now we're talking about what he wants to talk about, not what I want to talk about. I'm not in power anymore. I'm not in control. And it's my class. I could take control, right? But when I give up that time, he gets to pick the topic. I don't. And if every single person said, yep, I want my minute. If you're going to give me a minute, I want my minute. If every single person in my class, I usually have classes of 22 people, right? If every single one of you said, I want my minute, that's 22 minutes gone. Plus, change out times, that's a half hour of class time that I have to give up for topics that I'm not picking. You're picking. You could totally derail my whole class, right? I mean, that's the power of speaking. You're choosing the topic. You're in charge of what's happening. You're the one with power at that point. So why aren't we taking that power? Why aren't we pumped and taking it? Well, we've been taught that power comes with a lot of risk. And a lot of times, now I'm not saying there's not risk, right? I mean, Martin Luther King wasn't killed speaking, but I'm pretty sure that he was killed for the things he said, right? So there's definitely risks for stepping up and sharing your opinion and speaking, right? Especially if you're a marginalized body or oppressed in any way. We've been seeing that with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Like what's happening to the protesters as they're standing up and speaking. Many of them are being harmed and hurt, right? Power is powerful. Power operates on all these different levels. But for the most part, or I should say not the most part, but often what happens is people make up those assumptions even if they're not actually going to happen. So a lot of times people will think, oh, I'll look stupid or people will make fun of me or whatever, when in reality, and I will ask them, like when the kid goes up, I'll say, does anyone have any ill feelings towards him? And everybody's like, what? No, right? And if people mess up, usually people are thinking, oh my God, keep going, you're doing great. They don't think, oh, what an idiot, right? Like usually people are very kind. But of course, it's different when you're up there, right? So I talk a lot about how power impacts public speaking and how power influences how likely we are to give speeches, you know, our topics and how we craft them. But also, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about teaching public speaking is that I want you to be ready when you need to use that power. Now, when a blue-haired professor says, who wants to come up here, right? When a blue-haired professor says, who wants to come up here, that may not be persuasive enough. You may not feel the need to speak enough. But let's say your sibling's in trouble and they have to go to court and they need someone to testify for them, right? Like, let's say you're at risk of losing your house and you need to go argue with the bank because they messed up and you don't deserve to lose your house, right? Let's say someone harms you and you need to, speak against them. Like, I want you ready when that tips for you and you want to use your power. I'm not trying to convince you that you should use it all the time or that you should love public speaking like I do. I have a problem where I can't shut up. Like, if I'm in a situation and I think my voice could change something, I'm talking constantly. So, I mean, that's not true for everybody, and I understand that. But what I do want you ready and confident when those times happen where you're like, now is the time to use my voice. Now is the time to use my power. Now is the time to take this to benefit. So I set this class up in a very sort of like, we're trying to figure out what a speech is. We're trying to figure out why a speech. Why would we give a speech, right? So now we have kind of this idea about like the pros and cons of giving speeches and what a speech is, right? A speaker, an audience, a topic. Boom. That's a speech. Aristotle, baby. Now we're going to start to see pieces of speech. And like how things work together. So the future sort of things that are going to come are how you might build the pieces of the speech. And lucky for you, we have to do a speech in a week and a half. So we're going to use our first speech to do that, to learn those things. We're not going to learn structure in a vacuum. We're going to practice structure with our first speech. We're not going to just pick random topics. We're going to pick the topic of our speeches. Yay! So we're going to learn these skills by doing them. How fun! Okay, so that's basics on what a speech is, why a speech is, why you would ever want to give a speech, and why I think it's important you need to know these skills. Because even if you don't like public speaking, even if you don't do it a lot, even if you're not excited about it, if you're in a situation where you need to use the power of your voice, I want you to be able to do so confidently. And I want you to be able to have that, like, confidence and skill behind you.